So yesterday what we covered, and even the day before when we did our coin flipping, we were looking at one trait at a time. What are the chances when you cross this and this that the offspring will be tall? What are the chances the offspring will be red? What are the chances that the offspring will be short, etc.? You were looking at one trait at a time. And that's called a monohybrid cross. However, sometimes you will be asked to do a cross where they want to know what kind of results would you get for two traits at the same time. Meaning, what if I cross red flowered tall plants, two heterozygous that are heterozygous for red flowers and heterozygous for tall, and they want to know what are the chances that you'll get some offspring that are also red flowered and tall. So they're basically asking you, what are the chances of both of these outcomes, having red flowers and being tall, what are the chances of both of those outcomes happening in an offspring? So we're looking at two traits at once. You could even look at 3 traits at once, 4 traits at once. It can get to where you're looking lots and lots and lots of traits at one time. But if you know the product rule, this is very, very easy to solve. So the product rule, remember, said that the chance of any two events both happening was the product of their individual chances. So they told you that the original plants were heterozygous for red and heterozygous for tall. And this is how you write that. You're showing the red, and then next to it you're showing the tall. And the other parent was also heterozygous for red and heterozygous for tall. So this is what your original parents look like. So using the product rule, what we'll do is, rather than trying to work with R's and T's at the same time, we're just going to separate them back out and do the crosses one at a time. So we can start by finding out, and our question was, what are the chances of having an offspring that are red and tall? That was what it was originally asking us to do. So if we just split this up, we can look at just the chances of red. Big R, little r. Big R, little r. What are the chances of red? Anybody can tell me from that? You can fill it in if that helps. Yes. So our chances of red are 3/4. And now we can do the same thing for our T's and get our chances of tall. It's going to look identical actually because we're still crossing big letter, little letter with big letter, little letter. So therefore our chances of being tall are also going to be 3/4. Does that make sense? So we have a 3/4 chance from this cross of them being red. We have a 3/4 chance from this cross of them being tall. And so the chances of them having both of these traits, being both red and tall, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16. It's a 9/16 chance of them having both of those traits. So that's how you would do a dihybrid cross using the product rule. Now to see if you understand this, let's see if you can tell me what percentage of them or what fraction of them would come out white and short.
7/16.
I have one person saying 7/16. My other class, one of my classes, everybody wanted to say 7/16 like her because they figured, well, if you add 9/16 and 7/16, you get all 16.
No.
But that's actually not the right answer.
1/16.
Now you're 1/16. So let's take a look. What are the chances of white? Well, here was our cross. What are the chances of white?
1/4.
1/4. And here we had 3/4 tall, and the chances of short also 1/4. So 1/4 times 1/4, our chances of being white and short are 1/16. So what are the rest of them then? Right, the other two combinations. Some would be red and short, and some would be white and tall. There's 4 possibilities. The most common possibility is red and tall. 3/4 times 3/4. And then red and short, white and tall are less common, and then our least common is white and short. So that's how you would solve this using the product rule. Now, why would you want to do it this way as opposed to the other way? Well, because if we do a Punnett square, you recall what I told you, a Punnett square represents, you have to represent all the possibilities. Well, that would mean that since this parent is going to give a copy of R randomly and a copy of T randomly, it could give the big R with the big T, big R with little t, little r with big T, or little r with little t. There's 4 possibilities of what this parent can give as far as combinations of R and T. And as a matter of fact, if you recall, 2 to the n is 2. We have 2 pairs. So 2 squared is 4. We have 4 possibilities. If it was big R, big T, big S, little s, how many possibilities would there be? N would be what? N would be 3, and 2 to the 3rd, right, would be 8. So there would be big R with big T with big S, big R with big T with little s, little r with big T. You would have to figure them all out, all 8 of those possibilities. And if the other parent was the same, and they had 8 possibilities too, your Punnett square would be 64 boxes. Even with this, your Punnett square is going to be 16 boxes. It's going to be way too much. Here's what it looks like. And people that are not great with Punnett squares, now when you start putting 2 letters over each box, it really throws them off. They're like, okay, I got it when it was 4 boxes, but now you're putting 2 letters over each box. When you do the other ones, you're putting 3 letters over each box. It gets very confusing. But notice you get the same answer that we got in that little 60-second product rule problem. This is going to be tall and red, 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 tall and red. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's one more. This one. There you are. 9/16. Same answer, but much faster to do it the other way. All right? So I have a practice problem on this one too that I want to work through with you. It doesn't have a number, but it is there. It says, suppose that, let me clear this. Oh, here. All right. So they're saying, suppose that you are crossing big A, big B, little b, big C, with big A, little b, big C, and they want to know what are the chances of getting a child that is big A, big B, little c. So, easiest way to do this, product rule, we're going to separate them out. So let's first separate out our A's. How many boxes will our Punnett square have for this?
6.
If we're just doing the A's.
Oh, 4. No.
You can do it with 4. You really only need 2, right? This parent can give a big A or a little a, and this parent can only give a big A. In that cross, what are the chances of big A?
50.
50%, right? So 1 out of 2 chance of big A. And now we're going to cross our second one, big B with little b. What are our chances of big B from this cross? Also 1 out of 2, 50%. And finally, big C with big C. This one's going to look a little different. It's going to be one of our 4-box Punnett squares. And from this cross, what are our chances of little c? 1 out of 4, right? 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16. So we have a 1/16th chance of that particular combination. So you could do this with multiple, you could have, rather than just 3 traits, you could have 10 traits. But you could still solve it super, super quickly if you know how to use the product rule. One other thing I want to tell you, and then I'm going to have you guys work that very last problem, which is basically use this same cross, but to tell me the how many would have a particular phenotype. Remember I told you 2 to the n. And I don't want to confuse anybody, but Remember I said that n had to do with the number of pairs. So in this case, there were 3 pairs, and that means the number of possibilities, if I had to write them all out, would be 2 to the third, which would be 8 possibilities. So that would be big A, like I said, big A, big B, big C, big A, little b, big C, big A, little b, little c, and you'd have to keep going. This one actually doesn't have 2 to the third possibilities, though. There are 3 pairs. However, how many of those 3 pairs actually have an option that they can give something different? Only this one, right? In other words, it doesn't have an option. It's going to give big A. And it's automatically going to give little b. So technically, n is only 1 for this because there's only one that actually has an option that it can give 2 different things. And so in reality, 2 to the 1 is 2. There's only 2 options here. Big A with little b with big C, big A with little b with little c. So if you had to do a Punnett Square of this, which you will never ever have to do, if you know how to do the product rule, you don't have to worry about it. But it would actually be an 8 by 2 Punnett Square. That's what the Punnett Square would have to look like in order to represent all the possibilities. And then you'd have to count everything up, which would make it much more difficult. All right, let me pause this really quick. So this time, they want to know the chances of a particular phenotype. Same cross, but instead of asking you the chances of having a particular gene combination, they want to know the chances of a particular phenotype combination. So we use our same results, but we're just going to interpret them differently. So the first one is tall. If tall is dominant over short, they want to know, first of all, the chances of tall. So big A, and big A, little a, both would be tall. So our chances of tall are basically 100%, or 2 over 2, which is 1. If everybody's going to show that trait, just make it 1. That way you don't have to reduce later. So we know our chances of tall are 1, all of them. Next, our chances of white. Well, white is recessive, so that would be basically our chances of little b, which is 50%. So our chances of white, 1/2. And lastly, our chance of chubby, and chubby was dominant. So what fraction of this would be chubby? 3/4, right? 1, 2, 3, 3/4. So if you multiply that out, you get 3/8. And that would be your answer. That would be the fraction of them that would have all 3 of those traits at one time. Again, you would never want to try to do a Punnett Square to solve a problem like this. It would just take way too long. You would end up with an 8 by 2 Punnett Square, which would be ridiculous. Okay? So the very last thing I want to talk to you about is linked genes. Just a definition of what they are. Every time that we did a cross, we were assuming that the genes were on different chromosomes. In other words, you were flipping a coin separately for each separate trait. You flipped a coin for red, you flipped a coin for tall, you flipped a coin for square face or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you don't actually have, even though you have thousands of traits, thousands of genes, you don't have thousands of chromosomes. You only have 23. That means that some genes are on the same chromosome. In other words, you have some cases where gene A, gene B, gene C, and gene D are all on the same chromosome. They're not on separate ones. And that's called being linked. The thing about linked genes is this. When they were unlinked, and this is what we were assuming, we were saying that here's our chromosomes, and we have a chromosome with big A and a chromosome with little a, and then we were heterozygous for B, so we had big B and little b. And so our genotype was big A, big B, little b. And when we went to have kids, we would give a copy of A and a copy of B randomly. So we could give big A with big B with little b, little a with big B, or little a with little b. That's basically what that would mean. But imagine instead that A and B are on the same chromosome. A, and B. Now, when you go to pass it on, they're going to be inherited as a package deal. So you can only get big A with big B and little a with little b. Now there's cases of this. Red hair and freckles tend to be inherited as a package deal. Those genes are probably on the same chromosome. White cats with blue eyes are oftentimes deaf.